Oh no, can you do as always, right where you love, because I forgot how to hold up my heart.
I said the right thing,
or my
right?
butt.
I didn't skip anything.
What if I did it like this and then it was a butt?
A cat butt. That is how they show love.
Hey y'all, welcome back to our channel. I thought I'd start today off with a little question for you, Rachel, and that was, what do you think is the most important tab in Wattpad?
The story details tab.
The stories detail tab. That is the place where we set our story up to be found, where we give it a cover, where we give it the title, where we give it the blurb. This is such an important place for readers to find our works.
I think sometimes the story details page gets neglected a little bit. No really real thought going into it because you're too excited about getting the story out there, which I totally understand. But like you said, the story details page is where you give all of your potential readers the information they need to know about whether they want to read your story or not.
Yeah, so I think going through step by step and giving everybody do's and don'ts on this will help them make great choices and make their story super findable to other readers.
All right, so we just went straight down the page. And of course, the very first thing on the page is your title. And we know that the title of a story is extremely important. You'd think that would go without saying, but I've actually seen books that say TBD or no title or so-and-so story. Your title needs to be something great. It needs to be something relevant. It needs to be something eye-catching.
When you're going through and you're scrolling through on a search, you're looking at two things quickly. What's the title of this book and what's the cover look like? And if you've got this title that barely fits into the screen, that's a problem. So I think keeping a really short, precise title is a really great idea.
I am guilty of the fancy font generator. I like it. I think it's cute. I like to put it in my profile on the side. I have my name. You even have your name in a fancier font, the typewriter font. That's cool. That brings attention to your profile. It gives you some personality. That's fine. Don't use those in the titles of your books. What we found was it makes it harder for people to find your book. And it looks funky too, like in the URL in the top of the screen. It just doesn't look good. And emojis. A lot of people I see putting check marks after their books to show that it's completed. I don't like that either.
It's an old Wattpad practice before we went to having everything really clearly spelled out like that, to put the check marks or write complete next to the book. I don't think that's necessary anymore. I think Wattpad has done a great job of making it very clear when a story has the complete toggle switched over. If your story is part of a trilogy or a series, you want to make sure that you put the book numbers behind the stories. So the way it works for me is for Sanctuary, it is the title, and then in parentheses is book 2 of the Affliction trilogy. If you go and you look on Kindle or other major sites, this is a way that a book is properly displayed as being part of a series.
The next section is perhaps the most important part of this section, and the part that I hate the most because I hate writing these, but they're really, really important, and that's the description tab. So much that goes into this description tab. You will need to apply for reading lists, for the ambassador run profiles, for the Waddies, for story featuring, just about anything you can think of. You're gonna need all this information. So after you do it, when you post your story, you also need to save it somewhere. The first thing you want to put in your description is something that I never did until recently when we started looking at paid stories to see how they set up their description. And in every one we looked at, they had a tagline. And I really like that because it enables the reader to see a really quick, eye-catching, hooking sentence about the story without giving anything away.
You did a really great job with for Shadow and Star, your newest story, and putting a great tagline in there, which was face your dark side before it comes looking for you. What does that all mean? Face your dark side. That's it's intriguing. Now you've hooked the reader to want to go in and look at what is this story all about by reading the complete description, which, by the way, you want to keep under 250 words. Big, long descriptions like you see on the back of books is not the best idea in this case. Remember, we're moving in a fast-paced environment on Wattpad, so even our descriptions, fast, fast, fast.
One thing you do not want to do when you're writing a description is put an excerpt from your story. At this point, nobody cares
Yeah.
They haven't read your story yet. Keep it the who, the where, the what's at stake. The next section we're not going to spend a lot of time on because it is new and it's one of those things that Wattpad is kind of implementing and testing and seeing like what they can do with it, but it's the main characters section. Basically, you can enter in the names of your main characters and that's really all there is to it. The next one, tags, tags, tags. So important. You get 20 of them. You need to spend those tags wisely.
What I recommend you do is log onto a computer. It does not work well on a phone if you're using the apps. You want to go into the browse section and click your genre, and then up at the top it will give you extra tags, and if any of those tags are applicable to your story, you want to go in and use those tags. You also want to do that with any subgenre. So for instance, if you write sci-fi but it has a romance, you'd want to tag romance, and then you want to go into romance and look at, are any of the romance tags applicable to my story? The next thing you want to do is take a moment and look at, I would say, the top 25 stories in your genre and see if any of them are kind of falling in line with what you're writing, and look at the tags on them. I think those are the two best ways to go and find your tags. The things we don't want to do. We don't want to tag our characters in there when they're original characters. This works great for fan fiction. If you're writing about K-pop, whatever it is.
Kook.
Young Kook, that works really well. Also, we see a lot of people using obscure tags. So let's say you have the sun, like sunshine. People are usually not looking for that tag, so, but you will rank in that tag because there's probably not a lot of people in that tag. Rankings, honestly, for obscure tags do not do much for you, just because nobody's searching for them. I mean, if you want a little ranky doodad, the little badge, little award, next to it.
Yeah.
Like, that's great, but it's not doing anything to you to bring readers in. Also, when you're looking at those tags, don't be tagging something that is really popular if it does not apply to your story. So, bad boy is always very, very popular. Do not tag your story with bad boy if you do not have a bad boy in your story. All you're going to do is piss people off.
The genre is the next box. There are several genres on Wattpad: romance, action, adventure, a ton of them. It's pretty easy to tell what genres of story you're writing. However, there are a couple of things that we wanted to touch on. One is specifically related to teen fiction and romance. Teen fiction and romance are both very saturated genres. There are so many stories that your story may get lost in the shuffle. In fact, we just changed our story Adrift from teen fiction to mystery thriller because it was getting lost. One other thing you want to think about is knowing the difference between some of these easily confused genres. The ones that really came to mind for us were fantasy, sci-fi, and paranormal.
Sci-fi always has a scientific element. So if it were something in your story, even though it's made up, that your characters would down the line read in a science book, then that is science fiction. If it's made up things like dragons and magic and that type of stuff, then you're dealing more with a fantasy. So fantasy is never going to come true. It's all make-believe. And sci-fi has a probability of being like, oh, this could really happen.
Paranormal is like a mixture of things. Like if you have a vampire, werewolf, and a zombie all in the same story, you might want to put that as paranormal. Just know the difference between those things before you start tagging them or choosing that genre, because if a person who wants to read a high fantasy comes in and you've written a ghost story, they're not going to be very happy. The next one, target audience, is pretty simple but really important. There are 4 choices: middle grade, which goes from 8 years old to 13 years old. There's young adult, which goes from 13 years old to 18 years old. New adult, which is 18 to 25, and adult, which is 25 plus.
There's always this idea that your audience, for some reason, is based off of the age of your characters. And I think a great book to use as an example would be Stephen King's With the Body, because this is all about young kids that are ranging in the age of around 12 years old. But the content of the book, even though our main characters are children, is not children friendly.
It's mature. It's mature for sure. Copyright. This is something that I think a lot of people truly do not understand. Our recommendation to you is to just put all rights reserved.
Yep.
that gives you full control of your story. No one else can take it from you. No one else can translate it. No one else can do anything with it without your permission. That is the safest bet.
People get really confused on what copyright is. Copyright is verbatim your story. If your story is once upon a time, there was a frog who jumped over the creek, and it just continues on. And then you find another story that is once upon a time, there was a frog who jumped over a creek. You have a copyright issue. Now, ideas are not copyrighted. So if someone's taken that idea and they're now writing about a frog that jumped over a creek, but their story is not verbatim your story, there is no copyright infringement here. And this is what we see a lot when we're wondering how the heck do people write fan fiction based off of Sarah J. Maas books. That's because you are writing a whole new story and therefore you cannot copyright that. Now, you might end up with an issue if they've trademarked characters, which I'm sure big authors have trademarked their characters, and that's why you wouldn't be able to publish it. But when it comes to the story, you have no leg room when somebody has taken your idea and written it as their own.
Yeah. The last question on the page is regarding rating, and it's whether it's mature or not. Anything depicting detailed sex or violence has to be marked mature. You can have sex scenes in a story as long as it's marked mature, but you have to have a plot that is a standalone plot that you could have without the sex. So if you want to have sex in your story, that's fine. We do. But we also have real plots that don't revolve around sex. Just make sure you mark it correctly, because if you don't, your story's gonna be deleted. And that's gonna be real bad for some of you guys that you only write on Wattpad. We've seen what happens when your story gets banned. You can't even get to it anymore. And if you're in doubt, here's what you could do. You can look on Wattpad's help page. They have the guidelines. So just be careful. If you're writing about something that you feel is iffy or maybe a little bit on the risque side, just take the time to research and see.
Ooh, I just thought of another switch. That is the very last switch on this page, which you have to remember to go back to after you've done all of your updates, which is to flip the complete switch. We already know, it is no secret that readers look for complete stories for fear that an updated story is going to get dropped. So when you are done writing, it is time to go in and flip that switch. So the detail page is the most important thing you do besides writing your story. So make sure you take your time, fill everything in correctly, make sure you have somebody come back over and look at things, that you're not putting spelling errors in there, punctuation errors in there, because this is your first impression to your future readers. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them, give you a little guidance.
If you want to read our stories and check out our story details page, because we spend a lot of time on them, please go to our profile at Crystal and Felicity.
If you loved this video or any of our videos, hit the subscribe button and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss an update every Friday.
And as always, write what you love.